Welcome to Giving an Answer, the show dedicated to defending the historic Christian faith. I am your host, Harold Felder, and today the topic is intelligent design. To talk with me about this is Ted Wright. Ted has a bachelor's degree in anthropology, a master's in apologetics from Southern Evangelical Seminary, and he's professor of apologetics and Old Testament at Southern Evangelical Bible College. All right. Did I leave anything out?
That's about it.
Okay. Well, I think I did leave something out. Is there something you want to add?
Well, I like climbing mountains and taking risks.
And
I have a son and a beautiful wife.
there you go. See, man, I watch out for my guests.
Right.
Because if your wife saw this and you didn't say that, man,
I would be in deep water.
I'm looking out for you.
I'd be in hot water.
I'm looking out for you. Okay, let's get right to it.
Yes.
We're talking about intelligent design. So, Ted, tell me, what is intelligent design?
Absolutely. Let me start off by saying that intelligent design has been in the news lately a lot. You may have heard about it on the President Bush talking about the possibility of teaching intelligent design alongside of the traditional Darwinian model, and also just recently
Talk a little bit about that for those who haven't been up to date on the news and
right.
good stuff.
Essentially, what he's saying is that for years, I mean, since at least 1925, since the Scopes trial, in the American public schools, traditionally has taught when it comes to human origins, they teach solely Darwinian evolution. And by Darwinian evolution, what I mean by that is the fact that everything that you see, every created thing that you see in the world, plants, animals, and everything, got here by undirected natural causes, not by an intelligent creator or God. And that has been taught that way for years. But recently, things have been coming into the forefront of scientific research that really challenge this. And so President Bush is making a statement that there are other people in America who believe as well. And there's a recent Zogby poll that shows that 71% of the public in America favors teaching an alternative to the theory of evolution. And so President Bush is saying that he has no problem with teaching the controversy of evolution and showing that there are alternative theories to the traditional Darwinian model. So intelligent design comes along, and it is an exciting new field of inquiry. It's although it's new, the term intelligent design is new, and the whole movement is fairly new. It has roots that go all the way back to in the Middle Ages. There have been by theologians. They have had arguments for design. What I mean by that is that the theologians have said that the world exhibits characteristics of being designed by an intelligent creator. And the most famous one of all was put forth by a man by the name of William Paley. And he wrote a book in 1802 called Natural Theology. And people may be familiar with this argument. It's called the watchmaker argument for God's existence. Yeah. And essentially the argument goes like this, that if you were walking in a field and you were, just seeing dirt and rocks and things like that, and all of a sudden you look down in the dirt and you find a gold watch, you're going to pick the thing up, but you wouldn't come to the conclusion that that watch just got there by chance. That you open the lid up and you see the movement of the hands, you look at the back of it and there's gears, there's things that make it go, the clock go round and round. So you don't deduce from that, or you don't conclude that that was just happened by chance. You know that there was a watchmaker. And that's what William Paley said, that watches show evidences of watchmakers. Well, he said that the world, and specifically the mammalian eye, all of our eyeballs have lens and the very specific, all kinds of the iris and all that kind of thing, it shows evidence of adaptation of means to ends. In other words, that the eye is specifically adapted to see and to focus, and this shows evidence of design. Well, for years, those arguments were pretty much standard, and nobody disagreed with them. And then along came Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. The book is called On the Origin of Species. It was published in 1859. And the book was brought forth because Charles Darwin started out, he went on a voyage as a naturalist. Although he was never trained as a naturalist, he was never trained to be a scientist. And oddly enough,
what was his occupation?
He started out going to seminary. Imagine that. Charles
No, I
Darwin.
didn't know that.
Yes, he did. Started out as a divinity student, but became disillusioned and wanted to become a natural scientist. Now, you got to remember, this was in the 1850s and the 1840s in England, and during that time was a lot of people, there was a lot of amateur science going on, and Darwin was part of this Victorian era of amateur scientists. But there, I say that, but there were some fairly good observations and some fairly good beginning science that was going on at the time. Now, what he's famous for is, of course, is his theory of evolution, and where he came up with it was the boat that he was on, called the Beagle, the HMS Beagle, sailed to the Galapagos Islands, just to the west of South America, this western part of South America, and he noticed that on these set of islands called the archipelago, the Galapagos Archipelago, which is a series of islands in the eastern part of South America, he noticed, and they took observations of these little birds called finches, but he noticed that on some islands the finches' beaks were shaped a little different than on the other islands, and he noticed that these beaks seemed to be adapted to the individual birds. So he came up with the idea that, well, if this is the case on a small scale, then this is going to account for how we have the different kinds of animals that you see today: the giraffe, the elephant, the lion, the tiger, fish.
That's a big leap.
A huge leap, yeah, big leap. But of course, Darwin believed that eventually, given enough time and enough research, that science would eventually show this to be true. And he had even problems with it himself, and it was a theory, and it was a hypothesis, but he believed that eventually science was going to prove him right. Well, here we are in the 21st century, and it's actually the direct opposite. And even people who initially agree with Darwin admit that the mechanism for the Darwinian evolution, and the mechanism is natural selection, mutation and natural selection, the mechanism cannot account for the complexity and the variety that we see today, not just in the biological realm, but you take that mechanism and extrapolate it around everything in visible creation, not just animals, but stars and the universe and everything got here by chance, by undirected natural causes. Now, you asked me at the beginning, what is intelligent design? And I'd like to just read from a book written by one of the forefront thinkers in this area, is a guy who's got a PhD in mathematics and a PhD in philosophy. His name is William Dembski, and he wrote a book about this, and basically outlined 4 principles that I'd like to read to you here. 4 principles about intelligent design, exactly what is intelligent design, and how does this kind of answer the question or answer the problem of the Darwinians today. And this is what he says here. These are the 4 principles, and I'll read all 4, and then I'll try to explain the first couple that I think are very important. Number 1, intelligent design, they say, is a scientific and philosophical critique of naturalism, where the scientific critique identifies empirical inadequacies of naturalistic evolutionary theories, and the philosophical critique demonstrates how naturalism subverts every area of inquiry that it touches. That's the first principle. So
you are going to translate this for us?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
I'll try to put it in layman's terms. So it's a scientific and philosophical critique of naturalism. Okay. And naturalism is the philosophy that nature is all that there is no God, there is no invisible world, there's no spiritual world. They just posit, just among everything, that nature is all that there is.
And this is written by who?
This is written by William Dembski.
Now, who is he?
William Dembski is a mathematician and a philosopher. And,
right.
And this
where
book,
does he stand at?
This book, he is an intelligent design theorist, and he actually came up with an explanatory filter to detect intelligent design, and I'll explain that in just a second as well. Okay. But Dembski actually edited this book. That's a collection of essays by not just like preachers or people who believe in the Bible. Intelligent design theory includes mathematicians, biologists, geneticists, people who are very much in the hard sciences. Chemistry, geology, paleontology, embryology. I mean, you can name it across the board. There are scientists that are really doing hardcore science that are questioning the very foundations of the Darwinian mechanism.
Now, that's very, very important, because I want you to, I want to make that evident, that what you just said, because we are led to believe that Christians or people who believe in intelligent design are just Bible thumpers.
Exactly.
That all scientists are on the side of evolution. All scientists accept the fact that evolution is true, and it's just us ignorant Bible thumpers who disagree with that.
Exactly. And in logic, that's called a straw man argument, where they will build up a false image of a position and then blow that false image away, but that's not the position that we hold at all.
Right.
So that's the first one. The first principle is a philosophical and scientific critique of naturalism. And I'm going to unpack that in just a second. The second one is it's also a positive scientific research program known as intelligent design for investigating the effects of intelligent causes. And that's important that you make this distinction, that it investigates the effects of intelligent causes. This is what allows it to become a science, because many people who object to intelligent design or the teaching of intelligent design say that, well, it's just you trying to bring in religion in the back door.
Yeah, that's what you always hear.
Yeah, but it's actually not that at all, and it's a scientific research program in which you can investigate intelligent causes. And then number 3 and 4, I'll just briefly mention here, intelligent design is also a cultural movement for systematically rethinking every field of inquiry that has been affected by naturalism, reconceptualizing it in terms of design. And number 4, a sustained theological investigation that connects the intelligence inferred by intelligent design with the God of Scripture and therewith formulates a coherent theology of nature. So we won't talk about the last two, but the first two I want to unpack a little bit more if I can. Yeah. The first one, the critique of philosophical or of methodological naturalism. And then the second one, the positive research program. Let me start with the second one. It's a research program that investigates the effects of intelligent causes. Now, do we know of any other science today that does that? As a matter of fact, we do. And there are fields of inquiry that actually do this very thing. For instance, forensic science. Yeah. Have you ever watched the show CSI?
Oh, I love that show. CSI, New York, Miami.
Exactly.
I think next week they're going to have like a Pittsburgh or Charlotte. Yeah,
CSI.
CSI Charlotte.
CSI, I mean, what the point of CSI is they're trying to investigate the crime scene. They're trying to find out what happened at this crime scene. So they're investigating the cause. They find somebody dead laid on the street. Okay, what do they want to find out? They want to find out, was this an accident? Did this person die by natural causes? In other words, was it a natural effect, or was there murder involved? If there was murder involved, that means that there was somebody who's a murderer. Right. So they're investigating the effects of intelligent causes. That's exactly what they do. So that's one. That's forensic science. Artificial intelligence, which is a field of inquiry that investigates this. Cryptography. Cryptography is very important today, especially in computer applications and identity theft. Computer programmers who actually write programs to encrypt programs are based on intelligent causation. In other words, when they encrypt messages and things like that, they use this method of intelligent causation. Archaeology as well. Archaeology is an easy one. I mean, when you're an archaeologist and you go to a site, you want to look and you find what distinguishes a rock from an arrowhead. I mean, you know an arrowhead from a rock. Well, what's the difference? Because the arrowhead shows evidence of design. It shows the evidence that somebody chipped away the rock to make an arrowhead. Well, that's exactly what intelligent design is doing. The biggest one is, I think, the most interesting one is SETI, S-E-T-I. And what that means is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. I don't know if NASA's doing it, but I know that there are some researchers in America and maybe in other parts of the world who are researching or are trying to find out if there are alien species living in other planets or in the solar system. And it was actually popularized by a book by Carl Sagan, which was made into a movie that starred Jodie Foster.
Yeah,
remember you seen the movie Contact? Well, the whole premise of the thing is that they're looking for intelligent messages from outer space. And how do they do this? They do it by, they aim radio telescopes way out into deep space, and by aiming these telescopes into deep space, they're basically listening. They're listening. There's noise in space, and there's all kinds of static. Now, what distinguishes static from an intelligent design or an intelligent message? They know a pattern. Well, that's what they do. They're trying to detect patterns. So essentially, this is what this is. So whenever the methods detect intelligent causation, the underlying entity that is involved is information. In other words, it's not just the thing that they're looking at, but the information content. It's kind of like if you have a box of Scrabble blocks, you know, they all have letters on them. And you can shake those up and throw them down, but imagine having an entire Shakespearean play that just fell out of a Scrabble box. Well, you wouldn't just assume that that just happened by chance. You would assume that someone who understood Shakespeare put that together. Well, the amazing thing is that there is incredible evidence, not just of Scrabble, but DNA. DNA are basically genetic code, which every living thing has a genetic code, a DNA code. And the problem, though, for the Darwinian mechanism is the Darwinian mechanism cannot account for the information content. It's not so much that you have protein and amino acids and protein molecules and things like this. The problem for the Darwinian mechanism is to try to explain that in terms of natural causation. Nowhere in nature do you find that complex information found in just by chance. It happens by intelligent causation. So this is what intelligent design does: is it investigates intelligent causes.
But I wanted to interject something there, because when you were talking about Carl Sagan, and what it reminded me of was that in that movie Contact, the way they were able to determine that there was something out there, there was some intelligent life, was a series of prime numbers.
Exactly.
So they were like this, and they were like in a series of prime numbers. So they said, well, okay, then that must be intelligence.
Mathematical code, exactly.
Right.
Yes.
However, the same Carl Sagan can look at DNA or can look at a brain cell, which has tons of information, and not consider that to be something in design, or not to consider that something that conveys information, or not consider that something the source of intelligence. Yet prime numbers over and over again represents intelligence.
Absolutely, and that's the very farce of the whole thing, is that it seems to be such overwhelming evidence on one side to show that there is an intelligent cause, an intelligent designer behind the universe that we see and the things that are created. But of course, people who believe the Bible can look at the Bible and say that in the book of Romans chapter 1 says, therefore, since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen from the things that have been made, so that men are without excuse. So that people who say that they don't know there's a God, the issue is not so much the mind, the problem is the heart. They don't want to believe. That people intrinsically know that there is a God. But this intelligent design is basically challenging. The whole intelligent design movement is designed to challenge and to unseat the naturalistic philosophy that pervades modern academia. They accuse people who believe in intelligent design of trying to foist their religious views on the public. Well, it's actually the other way around, because Darwinian mechanism and naturalism itself assumes that nature is all that there is. I mean, they assume that methodological naturalism is that there is no God, before the question is even asked. So you can't even look at nature without assuming that there's not a God. So what intelligent design is doing is it's a way to unseat that naturalism and to show how that it is totally unfounded, based on science and good philosophy.
Let me interject something here.
Sure.
I watch TV way too much. I'm about to say a lot, way too much. But what I find interesting is, for instance, like I've been watching these reruns of X-Files.
Yes.
And what I find so amazing is that you could have the X-Files, and on one show, matter of fact, on the same show, it can espouse a creator and evolution in the same show. I think the general perception is, not just on shows like X-Files, but in general society, is that the two aren't incompatible. People will believe in both, because people will say, well, okay, there could be evolution. Maybe it's God that started the evolution. So I think that's something called theistic evolution.
Exactly.
How would you respond to that?
Absolutely. What's funny, though, is that the people who are the Darwinists, the people who follow Darwin today, one fellow just passed away, one of the most foremost spokesman of Darwinism is a guy by the name of Stephen Jay Gould, who is at Harvard University. The other two are a guy by the name of Michael Denton, and the other guy's name is Richard Dawkins. Now, these guys are hardcore Darwinists. They don't believe in evolution at all. I mean, they don't believe in creation at all. But the people who are saying that God used evolution, these evolutionists say that they basically don't have the guts to basically, because you can't accept evolution without accepting that there is no God, because it's inherent within Darwinian evolution that there is not a God. So the people who are evolutionists don't want them in their camp, and they say that they're just basically cowards. Another thing too is that the mechanism itself is, you might as well, when you say theistic evolution, and two, you have to define what that term evolution is, and I was going to do that in a minute, so I'll take this now, just time now to explain. And this is what Darwinists do. They equivocate on the term evolution. Now, you know, and it's many people, when they hear that word, it's initially a controversial concept anyway, when you hear the word term evolution. But there's actually two basic concepts of evolution. There's what's called microevolution, and there's another thing called macroevolution. Let me explain what I mean by micro and macro. Let me give you an example. Let's say, do you have a dog? Do you personally have a dog?
I had a dog, but let's not go there.
Okay, sorry. Well, let's just say, for instance, you did have a dog and you had a Chihuahua. Okay?
Right. Well, I had a real dog.
Okay, all right, sorry. Let's just say, for argument's sake, though, you had a Chihuahua. A Chihuahua is not a big dog, right?
No.
Well, I mean, do you think a Chihuahua would last very long in the Arctic?
No.
The Chihuahuas were actually bred, and I think they came from Mexico in a hot climate. Okay, and so imagine a Chihuahua on one end of the scale. Imagine just a whole bunch of dogs. A Chihuahua on one end of the scale, and there's actually hairless Chihuahuas who don't have any hair. And then you imagine a Saint Bernard. And you have all these other kinds of dogs in between. You've got big dogs, small dogs, and another interesting dog is, of course, the Labrador Retriever, which, do you know that a Labrador actually has webbed feet, and they're bred for, you know, fishing and things like that.
Well, that's what it's such a good swimmer.
For hunting, exactly. So, so you've got a huge variation of dogs. You've got Chihuahua on one end, you've got a Saint Bernard on the other end. Well, that is variation within a species.
Yeah.
In other words, it's variation. In other words, there are small changes. The Chihuahua is a dog, and the Saint Bernard is a dog. They're all dogs, and you know all the dogs in between. They don't change from dogness. They're still a dog.
Right,
Well, that is an example of microevolution. And this is what the intelligent design theorists agree with, that there is evidence of microevolution. What they mean by that is that animals, organisms, adapt to their environment. Human beings are the same way. For example, in cold climates, Eskimos or Inuits have developed over their eyes, after long periods of time of living in cold, windy areas, they have developed a thing over their eyelid. It's called an epicanthic fold. You ever, wonder why Oriental people or Asian people have their they have the slanted eyes? Well, the slanted eyes, the technical term for that is called an epicanthic fold. And what that is an extra layer of skin over their eyelid to protect their eyes from the wind. They can actually look into the wind, a harder wind than you or I would, because they have that extra layer of skin. Well, what that is an example of, another example of microevolution.
Right.
In other words, the organism can adapt to its environment. But that's not an example of macroevolution. What macroevolution says is that these small changes within the organism accounts for all of the variation that you see in the entire world of all the animals. Right. And that is just absolutely not the case. Microevolution cannot account for microevolution or macroevolution, because the mechanism itself just cannot account for that. Small changes over long periods of time cannot account for this. Let me just give you a few of the things that scientists, just a couple of these, that scientists have tried to, I'm just going to list them here, that have tried to explain these, that have completely failed, that naturalistic causes have completely failed. The origin of life. How did the origin, in other words, how did the first molecule of life get here? The origin of the genetic code. Naturalism can't explain that. The origin of multicellular life. Naturalism can't explain that. The origin of sexuality. What I mean by that is the female and the male. And in all the animal species, it's not, the evolution had to happen where both were complementary, where they could reproduce. So it can't, but naturalism, the Darwinian model, cannot account for that. The absence of transitional forms in the fossil record. What I mean by that is, if you dig down to the earth and you look at the layers of rock, you would expect to find the animals evolving over time. You may have seen the picture of the monkey walking on his hands, and you see him gradually growing up to be a man and whatever. In the fossil record, there's absolutely zero evidence of that whatsoever. And even the evolutionist Stephen Jay Gould, who is a Darwinist, had to admit that on the basis of the evidence that he had to change his view of Darwinism because there's no evidence for the transition that you would expect to see. And also what's called the biological Big Bang in the Cambrian era. And the area of rock and the fossil rocks is called the Cambrian. They call it the Cambrian explosion. Essentially what you have is before the Cambrian, called the Precambrian, the rocks below the Cambrian period, there's no life. And all of a sudden, there's an explosion of every major animal file in existence all at one time. But the problem is that the Darwinian model cannot account for this. And so intelligent design is basically poised to provide an answer for this. The philosopher of science, Thomas Kuhn's, who wrote a book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, published by the University of Chicago, basically said that whenever cultures go through paradigm shifts, in other words, they shift from one scientific view to the other, there's a major upheaval. And you can look back in the history of science and see that. At one time, it was believed that the Earth was flat, but after periods of observation, I mean, you can't argue that the Earth is flat anymore because we've sailed around it. We have spaceships that fly around it. So you eventually have to change your view, and that causes a scientific revolution. Also, it was once believed that the Earth was the center of the solar system, and that everything revolved around the Earth, and that was called the Ptolemaic view of the universe, or the solar system, or not the solar system, the Ptolemaic view, which was replaced by the Copernican view that the sun is at the center. And this happened, and that when people were shown the evidence, it was hard to believe because it has cultural implications, and intelligent design has cultural implications.
What is the status of the intelligent design movement right now?
Briefly, yeah. Yes. Just to briefly summarize, one of the best, to me, one of the best spokesmen for intelligent design is actually a law professor at University of California, Berkeley, Philip Johnson. And basically, he has started this whole thing. It started in 1992. He met at Southern Methodist University, and he has imposed what he's called the wedge. And he believes that that Darwinism has been won in the scientific field. In other words, the scientists really know that this is a dying theory, but it is basically, its left is to make the social case for it, that the social implications. Some people think that if we accept intelligent design, that we're all going to become Christians, that become a theocracy, and that's not the case at all.
I think that's the fear that the society has.
I think what intelligent design theorists want is to teach both sides of the issue, so that people will be informed to know that there is an alternative view to blind naturalistic Darwinistic evolution. And this is important because where we came from has meaning for who we are and implications for politics and society in general. And it's very important.
We're going to have to end on a note. Thanks a lot, Ted,
thank you very much
for coming on the show. Ted Wright, my guest. I would like to thank all of you for joining me. That concludes this episode of Giving an Answer. Be sure to join me again next time. And until then, goodbye and God bless.